Hello, here's a tutorial on how to use the basics of onlinesequencer.net. Um, if you're using it with your students, it's a good way for them to practice real-world music composition. And also you can reinforce some of the musical notation that you've been teaching in class. All right, let's start with the basics. So you have a grid here, and there, there are four sections of four, which coincides with 3/4 timing. So, and each square is a 16th note. So if you do every other note like I just did, you get eighth notes because I did every two. So if we play that, here's the play button. And right now it's set to piano. If we play that, it'll go to the end, back to the beginning. It'll loop it. So you have each measure is 16 different squares divided into sections of four. So that will be, this will be eighth notes. And like I said, it's set to piano right now by default. If I take every other one out, now I get quarter notes. And if you want to elongate these, you can make it a whole note. All right, so let's delete that. And what I like to do is just start with drum beats because that's what really gets the kids into it and gets them reading rhythms. So if you go here to your instrument level, you can change it to different drum kits. Let's go to electric drum kit. And now it's got the name of the instrument over here. And you can scroll up to get more, scroll down. So I do an assignment where I have them pick a low pitch instrument, a middle pitch instrument, and a high pitch instrument to make a beat. So we'll start with the kick drum or bass drum, and we'll do it on quarter notes. All right. And then I'll tell them to pick a mid instrument like snare. So let's do on. So this will be equivalent to quarter notes on beat 1, 2, 3, and 4. And this will be on the end of each beat. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And you could have them transcribe this into notation as an assignment. But what I let them do is just play around with this. And like I said, just 3 instruments. So now let's do a high, let's do sticks and do them on eighth notes. And I tell them there is no right or wrong to this. You make it how you want to sound. So now we have a nice beat. But that sounds a little fuddy-duddy. So let's play around with it. Let's move some of these beats. So you can either drag them and move them, or you can right click to delete them. Now let's see how that sounds. Let's get the stick clapping, doing something different. I don't like the stick sound. So let's delete all those. Like I said, I'm hitting right click on top of them to delete them. And let's go to hand clap. Now these are 16th notes. And like I said, now once you get one measure of it, you can go to the select, highlight them all, go up here to copy, paste, and it duplicates it right on top of it. So now I can drag, and now we have two measures. And then you can paste it again, drag it. Now you got three measures identical. And copy, paste it, and now it's here. Now we've got four measures. So what I usually do as an assignment is do 4 measures of a drum beat. And they can go in and edit it, or they can leave it all 4 the same. But that's what my beginning assignment is to make a drum beat. All right. Then the next assignment is take their drum beat and let's add a bass line to it. Oh, we don't want to change that. See, it just changed it. So let's change that back. And you'll see each instrument is a different color. Each sound of instrument is a different color. All right, let's click off of that so it's not highlighted anymore. And you just click anywhere in here to get off of that. Now let's go to a bass drum. Now, I usually throw in a little theory here. And I'll tell them we're going to do 1 chord per measure. And then I'll usually take and write on the chalkboard the notes that go with each chord of the scale. So I'll do 1, 3, and 5 for the 1 chord, 2 chord, so forth. And I write down just the pitches. I don't do it in notation. I just write the pitches. And so they know what to go. And I tell them your first chord needs to be the 1 or the 6th chord. So let's start with the 6th chord. And I usually just write it in the key of C just to make it easy. So let's start with A minor. All right, and you got to hit the draw instead of select. So hit the draw button in order to make this note. So let's do A. See how our bass lines up. All right, so there's our bass line and A. So then I'll tell them pick any other chords to go with it. So let's do 1. Let's go to the 3 chord. That's 6, so let's go to the 3 chord, which would be C, D, E. So let's go to E. And I'll tell them, a lot of times the bass keeps the same rhythm. So we'll do the same rhythm here. See how that sounds. Now let's go to the 1 chord. You see? And I reiterate the whole time that it's really not, it's how you want it to sound. And now let's go to G. All right, so I teach them as I'm going. You can go over, like what, you can have them listen to example songs and listen for all the different instrumentation And this is a good way to teach instrumentation and how each instrument is used. So now we have a bass line and a drum beat. Now let's get some accompaniment. So I usually tell them something like the piano, a chord type instrument, or you can use guitar. Let's use the electric piano. And now we're going to fill out these chords. So now we pick A minor as our first one. So I would have already went over that it's, they would know that that's the, we don't want to do whole notes. And we don't want that on beat one either. We want a nice accompaniment for our chord structure. Let's try beat 2 and have the end of each beat and see how that sounds. Alright, good. So that works. Let's go to select and let's move these 3 over. I like that. Let's move these 3 over too. I don't like that. Let's move it over to beat 1. And move this one. We'll leave that one, see how it sounds. Alright, so now you can take and highlight these all. Copy. Paste. And now we're going to drag them down to the E chord. So let's see if that works. So that F sharp is not in the key. So we want the F instead of E. Let's go down. So now we have just the same chords, and it's just that simple to move them all down to the E chord. Alright. Now let's do the same thing. Let's paste it. See if we can drag it to the C chord. And voicing, you can go over voicing, but that D sharp in there. So let's move that to the E. And like I said, they will have on the board the notes that go with each of these chords. So let's try that again. See how that sounds. Alright. Now let's paste it again and go to our 4 chords. So that's usually the assignment, is I tell them they got to get 4 chords, 4 different chords, starting on 1 and they can pick any chords within the key signature. If you want to do fancy and get sharps and flats, you can, but I usually just keep it in C to keep it easy. Alright, so A sharp's not on there, so let's move that to B. So now we have our 4 measures. Alright, and then I'll take it, and like I said, this may take 2 weeks or more to do this much. I'll focus on drums for a while, then I'll focus on bass lines and chord structure. And you can do these, you could do the chords before you do the bass line, or vice versa, just whatever you feel like you want to teach. And then I'll top it off with adding some embellishment. So I'll tell them, just pick some high-pitched sounding instrument that you've never heard of, something neat. Let's do with a sitar. What is a sitar? So now I'll tell them, I'll take your chord structure here. I changed that one by mistake. Let's change that back to electric piano. Click away. Now let's change instrument. Let's go back to sitar. And I'll take the time to teach them. A sitar is an Indian instrument. It's used in a lot of Indian music from India. And, you can play some videos of sitar. This is a good way to teach some of these instruments in rural settings. So I tell them, I said, first off, if you want to start with just however you want to do it. So we got A minor. You can use these notes of the chord. Hit draw. So A. And break up and arpeggiate these chords. All right, now let's see how that sounds. All right. If you don't like the sitar, we can take and highlight them all. Hit select, highlight them all. Let's change it to the koto. See how that sounds. All right, good. So now we can take this, keep the same rhythm, copy and paste it. Drag in, let's go down to our E chord. All right, see how that sounds. Now we go to C chord, copy, paste. C, and let's change these D's to E's. Alright. Let's paste it again. We'll copy this one so our chord structure's right. Copy. Paste. And a G. And then this is where you can go in and teach them skills. You know, so we can go. That's why it's good working in a key of C. So you can, we're still on the koto, hit draw again, and just add some of the notes to fill it in. And you see, you can just tell them, have them play around with it. Just fill in some of the gaps here. And like I said, you know, you can come up with this however, whatever you think would suit your kids' needs. If you want to have them write their own melody line, but this is a good way to teach chord structure in a real world setting. And then they can turn this into an assignment. And to turn it in, all they would do is save it by copying the link. So there's the link, and I'm going to email it to you right now so you can see it. And like I said, this is just the basics, and that you can be as creative or as simple as you'd like to be with this. But, you know, just knowing how the system works, and like I said, reinforcing rhythms and chord structure in a real world setting so they can go to application of some of this stuff when you're teaching composition, because that's usually one of the hardest things we teach in general music and chorus and band. We don't have an opportunity, and this way they can copy their URL, turn it into a Google assignment or whatever, and you can grade it as long as it meets the criteria. Come up with a rubric on, you know, that kind of stuff. And like I said, there's no right or wrong. It's all about um, how you want it to sound. As long as you meet the steps, certain type, with rhythm, with the chord structure, with bass line, with some kind of arpeggiated run in the top. All right, if you have any questions, send me an email. Like I said, the best thing to do is just play around with it and get familiar with the platform, and you'll be able to make some good music with it. I look forward to you emailing me some examples of some of your students' work and some of your work. All right, have a good day.